I never wanted war. All I wanted was a quiet life in the suburbs, mowing my lawn on Sundays and grilling steaks on a Saturday evening. But when the Homeowners Association, HOA, came after my shed, they awakened something in me. Something that couldn't be stopped with cease and desist letters or passive-aggressive newsletters. It started with a note, a flimsy, passive-aggressive pink slip tucked under my front door. Your shed violates Article 12, Section B, Paragraph 3 of the HOA covenant, it read. I laughed it off. It was a modest shed, tucked in the backyard, painted a neutral beige. Nothing extravagant, just a space to keep my tools and work on my woodworking projects. A week later, I came home to find an HOA board member snapping photos of the shed from behind my fence. I asked him what he was doing, and he muttered something about non-compliance and mandatory removal. I knew then that they were serious. I tried reasoning with them. I attended the next HOA meeting, documents in hand, arguing my case. But the board was a clique of retired bureaucrats who relished their tiny bit of power. They ruled in favor of demolition. I appealed, filed paperwork, cited local ordinances, hired a lawyer. The board delayed, then denied. I was given 30 days to take down the shed or face fines of $500 a day. I had to choose between backing down or fighting back. So I fought. Instead of tearing down the shed, I reinforced it. I doubled the walls, added insulation, and installed a new padlock. I renamed it the bunker. I even added solar panels. Then I started researching. I dug into the HOA's structure, its finances, and, most importantly, its weaknesses. I discovered that the HOA clubhouse, where they held their meetings and stored all their records, ran entirely on one aging power line connected to a private substation, located inconveniently close to my property line. That was their Achilles heel. I bided my time. I documented every move they made. I installed cameras, gathered signatures from neighbors who shared my resentment, and created a digital archive of every instance of HOA overreach. Then, during a particularly nasty thunderstorm, the clubhouse went dark. No lights, no power, no backups. The next morning, I posted a video on the neighborhood Facebook group. It detailed how vulnerable the HOA's infrastructure was. I never claimed responsibility. I just laid out the facts, asked questions, and hinted at the legal and logistical implications of the HOA overstepping their bounds. The neighborhood erupted. People started sharing their stories, fines for leaving trash cans out too long, warnings for unsightly lawn gnomes, and violations for paint colors being 2 shades too bold. I became a local hero. The shed became a symbol of resistance. Within a month, the board president resigned. 2 others followed. A recall vote was held. I was asked to join the board, but I declined. I wasn't in it for power. I just wanted peace. The new board quietly revised the covenants. My shed stayed. The clubhouse got new wiring. And the HOA learned that sometimes pushing too hard can lead to a pushback they never saw coming. And as for me, I still mow my lawn on Sundays and grill steaks on Saturdays. But now, I do it with a cold beer in hand, watching the sun reflect off the solar panels on my shed. A quiet monument to a battle well fought, continued in future entries. But peace never lasts where pettiness thrives. 6 months passed in relative harmony. The new board was reasonable, even likable. And for a while, the neighborhood began to resemble what I had always hoped for when I bought my home. Neighbors waved more, complaints disappeared, and kids actually played outside without fear of citation. Then the new HOA management company arrived. Fresh faces with crisp polo shirts and branded SUVs started prowling the streets. They weren't from our community. They were contractors, hired to enforce the rules with corporate efficiency. One of them, a guy named Brett with aviator sunglasses and an attitude that reeked of a former mall cop, took an immediate interest in my shed. "That structure is non-conforming," Brett told me, clipboard in hand. "We'll need to inspect it for compliance." "You can submit a request in writing," I said, shutting the gate in his face. He didn't like that. 2 days later, I got another notice, this time claiming my shed posed a fire risk and that I had 10 days to dismantle it. It wasn't even signed by a board member, just stamped with the logo of the new management company. I contacted the board, but they said the new management had autonomy in enforcement decisions. That's when I knew this wasn't over. I dusted off my files. The HOA's vulnerabilities hadn't disappeared. They had just been neglected. The clubhouse was upgraded, but the management office had not zoned for HOA operational command. I did some digging and learned the lease was shaky at best, sublet from a business facing bankruptcy. I printed the zoning laws, the fire codes, and every legal discrepancy I could find. I visited the city office. I made copies. I met with a city inspector I knew from my earlier battles. And just like before, I compiled it all into a new digital report. But this time, I didn't go public right away. I went strategic. I sent it to the HOA board directly, with a letter, "You came after my shed." Again. This time, I come for your foundation. Within a week, the HOA management company received an order to vacate the building for zoning violations. The city issued fines. Their operational center was shut down overnight. Without a hub, their enforcement team scattered like roaches in the light. And just to make the point even clearer, I hosted a community BBQ right next to the shed. I invited everyone, board members, neighbors, even Brett. Only Brett didn't show. We had music, grilled ribs, and lemonade. I gave a speech, brief, just a toast really, to standing your ground, especially when it has 4 reinforced walls and solar power. The crowd laughed. The new board clapped. And the shed? It still stood. A little older, a little stronger. Just like me. A few months had passed and the dust had settled. The HOA was quieter now, leaner, less aggressive. Their newsletters no longer read like court summonses, but more like friendly reminders. The tone had shifted, and so had the community's mood. People smiled more. Neighbors who never spoke beyond nodding from across their driveways now exchanged stories over fences and invited each other over for barbecues. I had unintentionally sparked something larger, a kind of suburban renaissance. But I wasn't done. You see, while the power had returned to the HOA clubhouse, I had installed my own form of oversight, a network of solar-powered trail cams and sensors along the edges of my yard. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew people. And I knew institutions like the HOA didn't change overnight. They evolved, sometimes out of fear, sometimes from necessity. One morning, I received an envelope in the mail. No name, no return address. Inside was a single page, a formal complaint about excessive backyard lighting and unauthorized surveillance devices. My trail cams. Old habits, it seemed, die hard. But this time, I wasn't alone. I posted a simple message on the Facebook group. Seems like someone's bothered by backyard security. Thoughts? The thread exploded. Dozens of neighbors chimed in. Some shared screenshots of similar letters they had received. Different violations, but the same language, same veiled threats. I decided to host an informal town hall. Not at the community center, not under the HOA's banner. Just in my driveway. Lawn chairs, a folding table with lemonade, and a speaker set up for some soft rock in the background. 30 people showed up. Some brought chips, others brought files. Actual files, years of grievances, fines, letters, photos, and copies of outdated covenants. We made a plan. A simple one. Transparency. One neighbor, Carla, a retired CPA, volunteered to audit the HOA's finances. Another, Dave, a quiet guy with a passion for policy, combed through the bylaws. I handled the tech, created a shared folder online, backed it up, added encryption. We called ourselves the Neighborhood Balance Committee. The HOA didn't love it, but they couldn't stop it either. Turns out the HOA had been charging administrative fees that weren't listed in any approved document. Carla found over $30,000 in questionable charges over the last 4 years. When this was brought to light, the new board, now just volunteers trying their best, agreed to issue credits to residents. They even opened up meetings to live streams, thanks to a webcam I donated. And the best part? My shed was featured in a local newspaper. They called it the little shed that stood its ground, they called it. They took a photo of me standing next to it, arms crossed, wearing my "This is my HOA compliance shirt" tee. But here's what I didn't tell the paper. Behind that shed was now a fully wired storm shelter. Solar-powered, Wi-Fi enabled, with its own rainwater collection system. Overkill? Maybe. But it was my sanctuary, my backup plan, my proof that no matter what they tried, I'd always have my space. One night, I sat there, rain pattering on the metal roof, sipping coffee and scrolling through a motion alert from one of the backyard cams. It was just a raccoon, waddling across the fence line, but for a second I wondered if another HOA member might try something stupid again. Turns out the HOA had been charging administrative fees that weren't listed in any approved document. Carla found over $30,000 in questionable charges over the last 4 years. When this was brought to light, the new board, now just volunteers trying their best, agreed to issue credits to residents. They even opened up meetings to live streams, thanks to a webcam I donated. And the best part? My shed was featured in a local newspaper. They called it the little shed that stood its ground, they called it. They took a photo of me standing next to it, arms crossed, wearing my "This is my HOA compliance shirt" tee. But here's what I didn't tell the paper. Behind that shed was now a fully wired storm shelter, solar-powered, Wi-Fi enabled, with its own rainwater collection system. Overkill? Maybe. But it was my sanctuary, my backup plan, my proof that no matter what they tried, I'd always have my space. One night, I sat there, rain pattering on the metal roof, sipping coffee and scrolling through a motion alert from one of the backyard cams. It was just a raccoon, waddling across the fence line. But for a second, I wondered if another HOA member might try something stupid again. They never did. And I'll catch someone driving by slowly, looking toward my backyard. Not to spy. Things didn't stay contained to our neighborhood for long. Within weeks of the audit and the refund checks being issued, word spread like wildfire. Local news stations picked up the story. At first, it was treated like a feel-good filler piece. Suburban dad defends his shed, ends up reforming HOA. But the comments section told a deeper story. People across the state, and even the country, were posting about their own HOA nightmares. fines for flower choices, cease and desists over kids' tree houses, lawsuits about fence colors. They weren't just angry, they were inspired. The news anchor wrapped up the segment with, "Seems like one man's backyard became the battleground for a much bigger fight." And she wasn't wrong. The next week, I received a package. No return label, just a box filled with letters, handwritten notes, printed emails, screenshots, pictures. People thanking me, telling me their own HOA horror stories. Some asked for advice. Others sent photos of their own backyard projects, now proudly displayed like protest banners. It was overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I built a website. Simple. Black background, bold white letters. Shedjustice.org. I shared my story, uploaded all the documents we had uncovered, created a submission form for others to report HOA abuse anonymously. Within 2 months, the site had over 80,000 visits. And then something happened I didn't expect. Lawyers started reaching out. A retired constitutional attorney from Arizona volunteered to help create a toolkit for homeowners. A former city inspector from Florida offered video guides on navigating zoning laws. People weren't just angry, they were ready. And with them, I launched a movement. We called it the Backyard Alliance. We weren't anti-community. We weren't anarchists. We just believed in balance. And we had one simple mission. No homeowner should live in fear of their own property. Our members started hosting workshops in their towns. We helped draft local resolutions, sat in on city council meetings, showed people how to record their HOA meetings, how to request financial transparency, and how to replace a power-hungry board with a people-first one. Some HOAs pushed back. One even threatened to sue me for inciting rebellion. But the community always fought back harder. In one Texas neighborhood, after a local HOA banned American flags during a non-holiday week, residents planted 100 flags, one in every yard. The board backed down in 24 hours. In another case in Nevada, a woman named Rosa was fined for growing vegetables in her backyard. A landscaping violation, they claimed. We helped her raise legal fees online, and when she won the case, the judge quoted my shed story in the ruling. "This is a home, not a dictatorship." Back in my neighborhood, things stayed calm. The shed had become a bit of a tourist stop. High school civics classes came by to take photos. People left notes on my mailbox. "Keep going. You saved our street. Power to the peaceful." And every time someone thanked me, I'd just smile and say, all I did was keep my shed. But inside, I knew better. It wasn't about a shed anymore. It was about showing people that no matter how small you think you are, if you stand your ground, smart, firm, and calm, the walls they built to box you in become their own downfall. I got one last letter from the original HOA board president, the one who started it all. No envelope, just a torn sheet of notebook paper slipped under my front mat. Guess I should have let the shed slide. Never knew it'd lead to this. Respect. That paper's still pinned to my shed wall, right above the breaker box I installed myself. The one that powers the solar grid I expanded last winter. That's my real victory. Not the attention, not the articles, not the accolades. Just the fact that now when I step into my backyard, I don't feel watched, policed, or judged. I feel free. And somewhere out there, another homeowner is looking at their fence or garden or kid's treehouse thinking, if he could fight back, maybe I can too. By the end of the year, shedjustice.org had over 500,000 visits. We weren't just a movement anymore. We were a force. Major media outlets picked up the story. CNN called me the accidental architect of the modern homeowner rebellion. Fox ran with "One Man's Shed Sparks National HOA Crackdown." Even Last Week Tonight made a satirical segment, complete with a mock-up of my shed on their set. It was surreal. That's when the politicians came knocking. A senator from my state reached out. He'd been looking to push a homeowners' rights bill for years, but it never gained traction. Now, with the media firestorm and grassroots support, he saw an opening. He asked if I would testify before a subcommittee hearing in D.C. "I'm just a guy with a shed," I told him, but apparently that's exactly what they wanted. Not a lawyer, not a lobbyist, just a homeowner who stood his ground. So I went. Washington was overwhelming. The Capitol building felt like another planet. Polished floors, heavy doors, marble everything. I wore my nicest button-down and stood in front of a semicircle of elected officials with a printed photo of my shed in hand. Behind me, dozens of others from across the country. Teachers, veterans, retirees who had flown in to share their HOA horror stories. My testimony wasn't angry. It wasn't even political. It was just honest. I never wanted a fight. I wanted to store my tools. That's it. But when people in power try to control the little things, the quiet things, the everyday parts of life, that's when we have to speak up. If not me, then who? If not over this, then what? The room was quiet when I finished. Not everyone agreed with me. I could see it in their eyes, but they listened. And that was a start. Within a month, 3 states had introduced homeowner autonomy acts. Small bills, sure. Just protections against excessive fines, requirements for financial transparency, basic homeowner appeal rights. But it was progress. Back home, things changed too. The new HOA board was more cautious now. They consulted the neighborhood on every decision. They even created a volunteer review panel made up of residents, not board members, to mediate complaints. I didn't join. I didn't need to. My work, at least locally, was done. But that didn't mean the fight was over. The bigger the movement got, the more pushback we faced. National HOA management companies launched PR campaigns calling us anti-community extremists. Some accused us of wanting to dismantle neighborhood order entirely. I even had one group threaten a lawsuit over slander and digital defamation. They never filed, of course. Truth is a great defense. But the threats reminded me that power rarely goes quietly. Still, we kept going. The Backyard Alliance now had chapters in 22 states. Our forum was filled with strategies, letter templates, legal contacts, and success stories. One single mom in North Carolina wrote, "Because of you, I kept my garden. Because of you, my daughter has a backyard again." That made it worth it. But fame is a strange thing. People started treating me like a symbol, not a person. I'd be eating at a local diner and someone would interrupt just to shake my hand. A documentary filmmaker wanted to follow me around for a year. A publisher offered a book deal. I turned them all down, because at the end of the day, I'm still just a guy with a shed. It's where I go when the noise gets too loud. It's where I sand down wood, repair old tools, and sip coffee during storms. I added a hammock last summer. Installed a small stereo system too. It's not just a shed anymore. It's my peace. And maybe that's the point of it all. In a world obsessed with control, metrics, and compliance, maybe the most revolutionary thing you can do is just claim a small patch of space and say, "This is mine. This is where I decide." So I keep it clean. I keep it quiet. But I keep it. And every time I open that door, I remember the day they tried to tear it down. They had rules, but I had roots. And roots, once deep enough, can crack any concrete, no matter how many bylaws they stack on top of them. It had been almost 2 years since the original battle. The shed stood stronger than ever, now practically a local landmark. The Backyard Alliance had matured into a real national network. We had lawyers, volunteers, even lobbyists working pro bono. I spent most of my time quietly supporting new cases, offering guidance and avoiding the spotlight. I figured the war was won. But then, he came back. Gerald Fenton, the former HOA board president, the man who started it all with a pink slip on my door, returned after disappearing post-resignation. Rumor had it he'd moved to Florida, licked his wounds, and tried to start a similar HOA down there. It failed spectacularly. He was now back in town, and to everyone's surprise, he had purchased a home just a few streets over. His return wasn't quiet. A new newsletter arrived in everyone's mailbox, unsigned but unmistakably his tone. Bolded sentences, all-caps words, and phrases like "restore dignity" and "correct the course." He started calling meetings at his house, quietly gathering the old guard, the few remaining HOA hardliners who had always hated the changes. It didn't take long before I heard the rumors. Gerald was running for HOA president in the upcoming election. I was torn. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let the new board handle it. I had fought my battle, earned my peace. But another part of me knew better. If he won, if that kind of power-hungry leadership returned, everything we had built would be undone in months. So I went to the meeting, not as a candidate, just as a resident. The clubhouse was packed. People stood along the walls. Some I hadn't seen in a year. There were murmurs and whispers, eyes darting between Gerald and me. He stood at the front, suit and tie, trying to sound measured. "We need to bring back order," he said. "We need to reinstate respect for regulations. I've reviewed the covenants, and I believe we've strayed too far from what this neighborhood was meant to be." A few scattered nods, but mostly silence. Then someone stood up. Rosa, the woman we helped in Nevada. She'd moved here a few months ago. Her voice was calm but unwavering. "You mean respect for power, not people." A wave of murmurs. Another stood. A teenager whose family almost lost their home due to back fines under the old board. "My dad said the last time you were in charge, our house didn't feel like home, just a target." More people began speaking, one by one. Short comments, but enough. You could feel the air shift. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The vote was held 2 days later. Gerald lost. Badly. The new board chair walked over to me after the announcement and whispered, he had 12 votes. Out of 200, I went home that night, stood in the shed, and just listened to the quiet. That was the last battle. The board added a clause soon after that, prevented former presidents removed by recall from ever running again. Fair, democratic, transparent. The newsletter changed tone, now friendly, even helpful. Events returned. Barbecues, movie nights, real community things, not mandates, not memos. And I went back to being what I always was, just a man with a shed. Only now that shed meant something bigger to people. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was a reminder that when regular folks stand their ground, they can move mountains, or at least stop bulldozers. Today it's spring. The cherry blossoms are blooming, and the air smells like fresh-cut grass and cedar. I just finished another little project, a wooden sign, carved by hand, now hanging just above the shed's door. It reads,